You can start when everybody's in. All right, so you're recording, and whenever you're ready to start, you can go.
Awesome. Hello, everybody. My name is Dee Dee Camarena. I'm a coordinator for ELD, Dual and World Languages at the Santa Clara County Office of Education. And I am here accompanied by my colleague, Olivia. Olivia, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Olivia Santillan. I'm a coordinator for History, Social Science, and Civic Engagement. And I'm on the same team as Dee Dee with the Multilingual and Humanities Education team.
Thank you. Whoops, sorry, technical difficulties already. All right, so for today, the goals that we have are first to address standards and best practices that are in relation to listening, and also to understand an introduction to the different types of listening. We have 5 of those for you, and we hope that's going to give you a better frame of reference of how to practice active listening with your students. And then at the very end, you're going to be using that knowledge from the first 2 goals in order to have an amazing listening experience. So we have 3 tips for you today in addition to the listening experience. So as I navigate my screen, let me make sure I have it. So as we mentioned, we wanted to explain and address how the standards fit into this experience. And from the ELD lens, I wanted to find the one standard that we're going to be addressing most certainly today. And as you see by what is on the screen, we have standards, standard 5 of part 1 of the ELD standards, and we have it for emerging, expanding, and bridging. What I'm going to do is I'm going to bring up a document that this came from in order to see it in a bigger context, and then I can highlight some things from it. When you do have this presentation in front of you, which will be available afterwards, you'll be able to click on these as well and have access to all of these resources. So what I did is I just took out from the California ELD standards, part 1 for grades 9 through 12. And again, this is standard 5. And the broad title of this is Exchanging Information and Ideas with Others Through Oral Collaborative Discussions on a Range of Social and Academic Topics. So if we start here on the left, we start with emerging, but these are all listening actively. And if we look at the skills with emerging, we're going to keep in mind that they're used to comprehending discussions on familiar social and academic topics. And they'll be able to do that by asking and answering some questions with some support. But when we move over to expanding, they also can comprehend oral presentations and discussions on various topics. But they also will be able to be asking and answering questions with that thoughtful consideration and looking at just moderate support for them. And then when we move over to bridging, again, be able to listen to a variety of academic and social topics, but they're going to also be able to ask and answer detailed and complex questions that show thoughtful consideration. And this part about this thoughtful consideration that we have in expanding and bridging, we also can bridge over to emerging. And you'll see that later when we're talking about the 5 types of listening and how those will blend into the types of listening and how you can exercise these standards by doing this purposeful, intentional types of listening with your students. On the bottom of this document, you will also find different scaffolds that go with each. So I'm not going to run through them now, but you will have access to this document so you can see what scaffolds are needed for emerging, expanding, and bridging, because they'll be right below it. So they'll go hand in hand. Bouncing back to our presentation. And here we're going to have Olivia start us off with tip number 2.
Okay, so tip number 2 focuses on considerations for text choice. And when we are considering which text to use with our students, there's a lot we have to take into account. At the same time, there are some practices and approaches that take into account student variability. And we went to Universal Design for Learning in order to illustrate the decision-making process around selecting engaging texts. So to have information that is relevant and valuable to the interest and goals of the students, to recruit interest, it's important to highlight the utility and the relevance of the text, and then to provide options that optimize what is relevant, valuable, and meaningful to the learner. So this requires really knowing your audience, knowing your students, and tracking their goals, tracking their interests, and having those opportunities and conversations around what their interests are. Also, with the nuance of, as a classroom teacher, when you spend time with students and you work through content, you're also able to identify what engages them within the content, and combining that content with learning goals. And so on the left in the orange box, you can see some tips for engagement in terms of how to, considerations for how to select engaging, not only text, but activities and so on. And you can get more information about this from CAS.org, and you can dig into the UDL guidelines. Next slide, please. Tip 3 is to provide performance-based feedback. So when we're thinking about helping students to grow in their skills, it is crucial to plan feedback. And feedback has one of the highest impacts on student learning. If you look, we included research from Hattie about this, and as well as some supporting information on feedback from, again, UDL, from the book UDL Theory and Practice. And so this has been a thoroughly researched method. As already mentioned, it's one of the most powerful influences on learning performance. And it's important to emphasize that the quality and type of feedback matters. And that's what Dee Dee's going to go over with us next. And you're on mute, Dee Dee.
I apologize. I do have dogs in the background, so I apologize for that. So going from what Olivia just said about giving informative feedback with your students, Hattie devised feedback into 3 different categories. On the left that you see with our colors, the blue is considered what we call feed up. On the middle, the green is feedback, and then the orange on the bottom is feed forward. What we are used to using is green in the middle, feedback, meaning while they're doing, this lesson, what feedback are you going to be giving them? They have the lesson in front of them, they've completed it, and the teacher gives that feedback. That tends to be what we're accustomed to and what usually happens. So in that is what you usually do. We would like to expand your thinking about what feedback is, and then take into consideration feed up and feed forward. So as you see, that's why those are darkened on the right-hand side. Here, on the first one, when we have feed up, that is the blue box that you see in there. That feed up is, you want to be establishing a purpose. Otherwise, why are we doing this? They need to know the reason behind this. Why are we particularly listening, for example, in this way? And as Olivia will share about how that is applicable to this. They want to know that they're making progress towards their goals. Feed up, also, we'd be answering the question with feed up. What are those goals and how can I attain them? Otherwise, how can I respond to the error that I've already made? As I mentioned before, the feedback is the teacher feedback that we've traditionally given on assignments. And then we have this other one called feed forward, which is in that orange box. And with that, we want to look at what has been done, but learn from that and move forward. How can I do better on my assignments in the future? What goals can I set for myself? What can I do to better my understanding of the content and my mistakes that I have made? And what am I going to be focusing on? What do I need to do better in the future? So again, for us, for our purposes today, we're going to be considering that feed up and that feed forward, and that those tend to be the new ones that we all haven't been using in the past. I'm very happy to say, just like what Olivia was stating before, with our feed up, feedback, feed forward, that is based off the work of Hattie. So what I made for you here is a form, and it's questions to ask yourself, or guiding questions for the student and for yourself when you want to provide this feedback. So I'm going to go ahead and open up the bigger tab of this, and when you do get the presentation, you will be able to link on these in order to get there. So in order to provide particular feedback, again, the blue was our feed up. So those are those students' learning's intentions. And this would be something that the student would be doing. So they're taking ownership over how they're going to be learning. So what is my goal? What do I want to do to achieve it? Again, desired outcomes, and in the target areas that the student themselves would like to receive feedback. So you're having them do some metacognitive thinking about where do they want to go when they're going to continue on with this work. And that's why there's a space here that they can use it to analyze their work. Feedback is what you have already been doing, so you could use this form for the teacher to put their feedback on here in writing, or it may actually, as it says in the green box, be a student-teacher conversation. And the teacher could be taking notes in that area from what they're talking about. The student can be taking notes from what the teacher is saying, or it can just be a conversation, and you can leave it up to the student of how they're going to receive that feedback and how are they going to note it. And then the last box that we have here down at the bottom is our feed forward. And those are the actions that the students are going to be taking again to complete their goal. So these would be types of things that they would be answering. For example, how does this feedback make me feel? Does it make me feel motivated or whatnot? If you're meeting face-to-face with the teacher with this, what are the main messages that I would like to convey? Are those comments fully understood? So if you're having a conversation with them and giving them feed forward, is it clear? Are they understood? And then if they were written down in the comments, what have I done well? What am I doing well to contribute to this success? And by identifying that, you can continue to do those things. And then the flip side always is, of course, what do I need to improve on and where am I going? And then I like this last part at the bottom. In order for me to do well in my assessment, the actions and steps I'm going to take are. So it's purposefully and intentionally having them think about that feedback in order to act upon that. And that's the whole purpose for this, is recognizing that there are these three forms of feedback and branching out into having students take ownership and have some agency over their learning in regards to the feedback, so they know where they're going and they understand the feedback that they're given. Okay, the next part of this, Olivia is going to continue with.
Okay, so we are going to now dive into listening and have a listening experience. Our listening experience is going to be in relation to one of the people in this image. And I will give more background and context as we move through. As you notice, there are two different images of the same event, and the reason that we decided to include two images was because the image on the darker image might be difficult for people to see or people to engage with. So we also included the image on the right that gives a little more context to what's happening. It shows more people in the background. So this could be a way to help with engagement, to pique students' interest level. And if you give the dark image and students are struggling to really make connections to the document because it's hard to make out what's happening, then you can add another perspective from that same image. Next slide, please. Okay, so Dee Dee, if you could open the note catcher. On this document is where we lay out the listening types. And I think, Jenna, are you going to add a link to this doc into the chat box if people want to access it?
Yes, I can do it right now.
Thank you. Okay, so the listening types are discriminative listening, appreciative listening, precise listening. Can you scroll up, Dee Dee, please? Strategic listening and critical listening. And so when you look at these 5 listening types, you also see on the right-hand side, there are skills that are associated with each listening type. So I'm just going to take a minute and stop on appreciative listening. So appreciative listening involves gaining experience listening in a variety of forms, recognizing the pleasure that listening can bring, recognizing feeling or mood that is evoked, recognizing the power of language, appreciating how words flow from a speaker. And I want to quickly relate this back to our discussion on feedback. The reason we wanted to really highlight feedback is because when you're looking at the listening type and the skills and you're thinking about applying this to a classroom setting and working with students, we wanted to give you a tool to be very intentional with the students to be able to identify in terms of your listening skills. These are your goals. This is where we're trying to get. And we had discussions around involving students in looking at these different listening types and being aware of them. Sometimes when we give messaging about listening, it's very broad. We tell students to listen carefully, and we don't necessarily really lay out what that means. So a benefit of sharing with students, these are the different listening types, is that it makes it very clear to them what is meant when they're asked to listen. And it's an opportunity to focus in on really specific skills around listening. So Dee Dee, if you can, thank you. So what we're going to ask you to do is to choose a listening type, and the link to the document is in the chat box. So you can reference the listening types, and then you're going to select specific skills to focus on. So next slide, please, Dee Dee. So this is a model. So if you want to focus on appreciative, and then choose for yourself what 2 skills you're going to focus on while we're doing the listening. And so we are going to listen to, if you go to the next slide, we're going to listen to Juan Romero, who is the young person in the image, tell the story of what happened that day and how it impacted his life. And we have the audio on a website called StoryCorps. And actually, before we get to the sound, Dee Dee, can you go to the note catcher again one more time? And scroll to the bottom, to the second page. Okay, right there. So if you see on the top of the second page, there's a section that says sourcing the text. That includes the name of the text type, the source, who created the source, and what or who the text is about. And so I thought it was important to include this information because this is a skill that's transferable. So if listening is a skill that's being practiced in a designated ELD class, for example, providing the sourcing is something that supports history social science, because that is that's a literacy skill specific to history social science. Another important thing about sourcing is that it helps highlight certain elements of a text. For example, when you see who created the source, it lists that there was someone who contributed music, which makes you aware of, oh, there's going to be music in what we're going to listen to. what we're listening to from StoryCorps, I've listened to more than one time, and I never paid attention to the music. And then when I sourced it and I noticed there was a musical contributor, it changed the way that I'm going to listen to this story this time around, with an awareness, oh, there's music, let me pay attention to the music, which I wasn't doing previously. Okay, Dee Dee, so if you could go to StoryCorps, and again, I'm going to repeat the ask that you select a listening type and you select how you're going to listen. So what skills you're going to focus on. And then after we're done listening, Dee Dee is going to facilitate a conversation from the participants around what they noticed by listening through that specific listening type. Okay, Dee Dee, and you're muted.
I see that it looks like there's a link on the bottom. However, the toolbar
Yes.
comes up. So can someone place that in the chat? And then I'll do screen shares and adjust the volume so that we can get ahead on that.
Okay, Jen, are you able to do that?
See, I don't have the link to the presentation.
Okay, so I will do that.
And Dee Dee, I think if you zoom out on the presentation, that toolbar will get a little bit smaller. So in the Omni bar, that magnifying glass next to the star, do you see that? Up where you type where the link address for the presentation is?
No, I do not see that. Olivia, did you put it in the chat box?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, okay, there you go.
All right. All right. Let me know if you can hear it. Give me a thumbs up.
They opened the door and the senator was talking on the phone. He put down the phone and says, "Come on in, boys." You could tell when he was looking at you that he's not looking through you, he's taking you into account. And I remember walking out of there like I was 10 feet tall. The next day, he had his victory speech. So they came down the service elevator, which is behind the kitchen. I remember extending my hand as far as I could, and then I remember him shaking my hand, and as he let go, somebody shot him. I kneeled onto him and put my hand between the cold concrete and his head just to make him comfortable. I could see his lips moving, so I put my ear next to his lips, and I heard him say, "Is everybody okay?" I said, "Yes, everybody's okay." I could feel the steady stream of blood coming through my fingers. I had a rosary in my shirt pocket, and I took it out, thinking that he would need it a lot more than me. I wrapped it around his right hand, and then they wheeled him away. The next day, I decided to go to school. I didn't want to think about it. But this woman was reading the newspaper, and you can see my picture in there with the senator on the floor. She turned around and showed me the picture and says, "This is you, isn't it?" And I remember looking at my hands, and there was dry blood in between my nails. Then I received bags of letters addressed to the busboy. There was a couple of angry letters. One of them even went as far as to say that if he hadn't stopped to shake your hand, the senator would have been alive. So I should be ashamed of myself for being so selfish. It's been long, 50 years, and I still get emotional. Tears come out. But I went to visit his grave in 2010. I felt like I needed to ask Kennedy to forgive me for not being able to stop those bullets from harming him. And I felt like, it would be a sign of respect to buy a suit I never owned a suit in my life. And so when I wore the suit and I stood in front of his grave, I felt a little bit like the first day that I met him. I felt important, I felt American, and I felt good.
Okay,
Okay,
Olivia.
so go ahead, Dee Dee.
No, go ahead. I was just going to ask if you wanted to follow up with that before we move on.
Yeah, just to add a little bit of information. So Juan Romero was came to the United States from Mexico when he was young. This event happened in LA. He was in high school at the time. I believe he was 16 years old. And he ended up moving eventually to San Jose and passed away in 2018. And so the reason that I chose this text and this image to share was, I was thinking about presenting this to high school students and thinking about their age and their experience. And we are in San Jose, so I was thinking about a local context, local for California, local to San Jose in the Bay Area. And an everyday person who was part of an extraordinary event.
Thank you. So for our last portion of our session today, we just wanted to have a discussion about our final thoughts about this. And when Olivia and I were going through all the skills that come from each listening type, we had a great conversation about, oh, well, this connects into reading. This skill connects right to writing. Oh, this skill, all these skills definitely connect with speaking. So that is our question to you. How could you perceive using these listening skills, these listening types, and connecting with reading, writing, and speaking? So you have the chat box. So if you can go ahead and write anything in there about how you perceive or how you would use these listening types to connect with your reading, writing, and your speaking.
And I think we were also interested in their experience from listening from that particular listening type. So if you want to share also what listening type you were using and how it impacted the experience for you.
And
What
then
I love about, go ahead, Jenna.
I was just going to say, if anybody wants to unmute themselves, we'd love to hear you also. So feel free to.
So we had something come in the chat from Jen, and she was saying that she used the precise listening skill, and it helped her focus on the actual details of what he was saying versus the ambient that was there, what he was wearing, or maybe even the music at the end. So thank you for sharing, Jen.
Yeah, and I was just going to add that I also wrote it. I took notes as I did it. So kind of made me think about writing and being more precise with my writing too.
There's that connection. Thank you, Jen. And here we also have Christy saying that she appreciates the description used to describe the scene, the cold concrete, the blood running through his fingers. I immediately thought of, oh my gosh, that gives me a visual picture of what it was really like to be there and how powerful those words can be. Christy, which listening type did you use?
I think I used the precise. I was trying to move my screens around so I could look back at which one.
Well, I get that.
Oh, there we go. The appreciative one, sorry.
The appreciative one.
Yeah.
Thank you. Does anybody else have anything that they would like to add about their particular listening type, in particular with this piece, or maybe even just the listening types in general? Is there one that you find that, oh my gosh, I never thought of listening in that manner? And that can be very powerful for my students, for my English learner students, for my students with disabilities.
Well, this is Jenna, and I just thought it was really nice to have some specific ideas to focus on. So I was looking at the strategic listening, and it really helped me focus on, connecting ideas and being able to summarize and predict by the end of it. So I really felt like having that focus really got me to make some personal connections with what was going on.
I think you make a great point, Jenna, as far as having that personal connection. We know if we're actually going back to what Olivia was talking about in the UDL guidelines, we need to have our students engaged. And obviously, Jenna found it really easy to focus and be more engaged because she had things specifically. She had a manner of how she was specifically listening, and therefore she ended up getting that connection, which leads to more engagement, right? So thank you, Jenna. And we also have Linda. She chimed in chat stating that she chose critical listening because she had an idea what the text would be. So really evaluating the source was most relevant. And I think of that and think of, maybe you are a history social science person.
It was because I did not know what the text was going to be.
Oh, got it, got it. Well, it sounds like you found definitely some benefit in that, and so you could guide your way of thinking.
Well, and I feel like strategic listening would have been better for, trying to gain like historical information.
Mm-hmm. And that's, if these listening types are new to you, like Linda, you chose one because you didn't think you knew what it's going to be about, so you thought that would help you. But maybe examining, like you were stating, the different listening types, strategic, maybe that would have been better now that you've seen the text. Okay, then we have Sophia on here. She chose strategic listening, and she learned things that she didn't know before by using that. And she was able to take this important event and see it through the eyes of a witness. And it was apparent that he felt like he was an average person. However, having this person in front of him and how great he was, she was saying that she was touching greatness and the way the event equalized the witnesses and Kennedy's status in the world. Just imagine being able to have that connection to anything. It's like seeing a celebrity, right? And you feel like you just have this magic that comes in you, and being able to, as you put it, Sophia, touching greatness in that way, that's of somebody having that status in the world, and how that can help you just not feel as if you are an average person, because you were able to do that.
And I was also thinking about, because as a former music director, what kinds of listening do we use in the music classroom? Mm-hmm. And how, it would be interesting to sort of take a look at the list of the different types of listening, because here we are asking students not to connect words and ideas, but sounds and patterns, and how that might translate to the normal, the academic classroom.
Mm-hmm. And thank you for mentioning that, Sophia. I just made a connection when you were stating that, and that in music, if you're recognizing patterns, I go from the language lens with that and looking at our ELD standards, and that is something huge for our emerging English learner students, and they have to be able to recognize those patterns as well to make meaning out of words, and so that would be powerful for them as well. And when we look at the note catcher that you were looking on, those skills, how are we exercising those skills? How are we practicing those skills? And so be able to focus in on those to improve upon those as well. So they're going hand in hand, it seems like it. So thank you, Sophia, for bringing that up. We have, let's see, a couple more that identifying specific skills will improve the feedback and that we can provide to students. And I think it makes it great for the teacher, and that they know what they are going to give feedback on, and obviously great for the students so they know what they're getting feedback on. And then a question from Laura. Critical listening. How did the music accompaniment affect our interpretations of the speaker's words and understanding his message? That's a great question. And I was thinking that as I was listening to that part, but I'll leave it up to you all as participants to chime in on that.
I can go. I mean, I didn't know if you were calling on me or the other Laura.
The other Laura left the message, but we welcome anyone.
Okay, so I think the listening with the music connects, it really sets the tone and the mood. And I'm a firm believer that music sets things off. So I really think that is a critical piece when you're combining things.
Mm-hmm.
This is the other Laura. I also, again, I just want to reiterate, I'm so appreciative of the 5 types of listening. I have never actually seen it broken down that way. But what I'm really drawn to is the appreciative listening, because I think this is something that our students don't get enough of, because we are, at least in my state, not California, we are very skill driven. And I think this is a side of their being that really, for all humans, needs to be developed and enjoyed. And I just really love included that and framed it for me, because I will carry that forward to my colleagues. Our students are due the ability to expand their appreciation in the domain of listening. So thank you.
You're welcome. I think you're right. I think appreciative is something that we're not trained to definitely, that's how we're going to listen, much less the other 5 types. And having that information was something that was brand new to me. And I know it was brand new to Olivia. And when she learned about it, she tapped into me and said, oh my gosh, this should be great, because it completely changed her way of listening and knowing these 5 types. And Olivia, I'm sure you can speak to that more. For myself, it allowed me to think for English learners, if I am able to teach them how to specifically listen in a certain way, it narrows their focus, and they're not going to take their prior knowledge from their other classes of all these different ways of listening, whatever those may be, however they identify it, and think they have to do everything all together when they are listening to this piece. They get a focus, they get to lower their anxiety, lower that affective filter, because they know exactly what is going to be asked of them. So I found that really beneficial as well. Olivia, did you want to chime into that at all?
Yeah, I just love precision, and that when we can have precise language around concepts, I think it's empowering. So we were having a discussion around sharing these listening types with students. And as Dee Dee mentioned, listening doesn't seem as threatening to students if you put, like, for example, precise writing. And that would make students feel nervous. So it's a way of opening up, understanding precision, or what does it mean to be a strategic writer or reader, through an experience that is somewhat simple. I can listen. At the same time, sometimes listening is complex because we don't give this precise language to students to understand what we mean. And so if they're spending a year with a teacher looking at these listening types and engaging with these skills, it's adding to their language. When they are struggling to understand something, they could maybe go to a teacher and say, I'm having difficulty recalling the details of what you said in the lecture. Can you please help me with that? And so having conversations with the students around transferring these listening skills to real world applications could be a powerful experience for a student.
And to add on and continue what Olivia was saying, listening can be very complex if you don't have a direction, if you don't have a focus. And that is backed up by the fact that the ELD standards, the California ELD standards, have listening specific standards. I'm sure the WEDed standards have specific listening standards. History, social science has them. Common Core and ELA has them. They all have a standard that is addressing listening. However, I've never known a teacher, including myself when I was in the classroom, I've never known a teacher to focus on that and actually teach how to listen, much less in these 5 types. So we're hopefully that this webinar is going to allow you all to understand the importance of listening and being able to articulate these 5 types and how you can utilize them in your classroom. Okay, so for information, you do have access to the note catcher that was put in the chat. And additionally, if you go to the SCOE blog series, and this is a link, and I believe that, Jenna, you put the link in the first part of the chat. Is that correct?
No, not this link, but I will put it in the chat right now.
Okay, so you'll be able to get it from the chat here. In addition, the SCOE blog series, when you do get to that page, it will have many other webinars that many other people in our office have put on as well. So you'll have that at your disposal to utilize that. They tend to come also with notes and in addition to the presentation. So you'll have all that to your disposal. As you see on the right, Jenna went ahead and put that link in the chat. So if you want to go ahead and grab that, so you'll have that. If you forget, just remember SCOE, Santa Clara County Office of Education blog series, and you'll be able to navigate your way there as well. Okay, so tomorrow we have another webinar on our Cinco de Mayo, Science Practices for Distance Learning with Jen Much. And guess what? She is one of our participants today. So Jen, did you want to add anything to that?
Sure, it's actually on Wednesday, the 6th, not
thank
tomorrow.
You. Okay, thank you.
But yeah, we're gonna just talk about some strategies on how to do science learning at home. And we're gonna practice using Jamboard as well. So if you're interested in that, be cool.
Great, thank you. All right, so there you go. Our contact information for Olivia and I, if you want to contact us with anything revolving around this. As you see, Olivia is History Social Science Coordinator and myself with ELD Dual and World. So if there's any questions that we can address with this, or if you just need a thought partner for anything else, please feel free to reach out via our emails and we'd be more than happy to get back to you. I am realizing right now that my email on the bottom has inappropriate, or sorry, a missing letter, and that the R is supposed to be an E. So I guess I better change that. Olivia, any parting words on your end?
I just want to say thank you for participating and joining us today.
Thank you. And I would like to ditto what Olivia said as well. Thank you so much. And we hope that you share this wealth of information. So thank you. Have a great rest of your day.